Okay. Hello, everyone. This is part two of the talk, No World Stands Alone. The first one, I was outside. There was too much noise. Now I have found a silence where the silence can accompany me. I was speaking about the relationship of the individual self with sight, and how when this self looks at phenomena, for example, any object, we see the object, we see the name we have given it, but what have we really named? And when we wonder about what the objects that we have names for example, there's this bottle in front of me, this cup in front of me. These are names for objects. There's this table here, like these are objects. And we give them names, but when you go to look at the object, it is not just an object, it's an atomic constitution. And when you look at the atomic constitution, it is not just an atomic constitution, and we have reduced the realm to vibrating strings. That means string theory explains reality, but we are a bunch of dimensions short. That means it requires, what is it, 10 or 11 dimensions to work? If the audience looks at the geometry of the snowflake, this is geometry of a snowflake. When you look at the human being, we also see a geometry, not a symmetry of this sort, but there is a geometrical way. If a snowflake, uh, you know, is this complex geometry, what is suggesting that the human being isn't? And the cool thing is about a geometrical reality is that there is no emotion. There's no character, there's no story. You can't become emotional unless there's somebody there to be emotional. So those people who have a non-dual perception on their attention, it's as if they witness their emotions. They are not their emotions, similar to how a person is not a thought. Thoughts come and go, like Chung Tzu says, it's like leaves of a tree. They change by the seasons. I feel geometry is the hidden nature, hidden language of nature. So, geometrical interconnectivity of realms. The concept of realms is literally the knife cutting the cake into pieces. So what it is we are one existential phenomena. We fragment this in accordance to what out of the content of our experience we identify. You know, it's strange. It's like by perceiving the human intelligence as a camera. Again, if we go to that metaphor, reception, expression simultaneously occurring. This brain of ours is like has a gravitational pull of sensory perception. Eyes open, insta vision. Okay, insta manifestation. It's like, oh my god, it's like the person opens their eyes. Did I just create a world? Oh. We are receiving a world and this receiving of the world has an ability to express. Like it's very strange. It's like it's instant. It's like somebody says the word apple, or somebody says visualize a giant blue cube, hovering in the air, glowing blue cube. You see, like you can visualize that, but it was instant. You see what it is? It's as if the mind can instantly be. The body does things just to see the attention. When I ask myself, has myself changed? I can say yes. But when I ask myself, can my awareness change? Awareness is not it's a quality. It's like it's not a form. Pretty much what that means is you can't, it's like when as Heraclitus says, no man steps in the same river twice, and it is not the same river, and it is not the same man. That means just when you put your foot in the river in one moment, doesn't imply that when you take it off and put it again, it's the same part of the river. The moment has changed. If we are multidimensional, that explains how the change and intelligence are simultaneous. If everything has to be in one room of thought, based on the visual senses, that means if only sight is the absolute, then there can be nothing else. It's like a person who is in one room of, let's say, a giant mansion, or one room of like this endless, or one part of an endless labyrinth. It's like the person can't say that's the whole labyrinth, you know? You can't say, it's like, I don't know what it is. There is always more. It's like, isn't it strange? Sometimes it feels like knowledge has no end. And I wonder, it's not that it has no end, its beginning is unknown. We are behavior. I feel that if a person becomes selfless, let's say you have heard some of my talks before and you're acquainted with, let us say, the idea in Taoism of action through inaction. That renders the person as a watcher of their moment. What does that mean? That means like how you watch a film, your eyes are like the cinema chair. Do you know? Your attention is all you got. Oh man. What can be said? The world, the more we know it, the bigger the complexity becomes. That means if we choose to distrust, there is endless reasons to distrust the world. If we choose to trust, there can be endless reasons to trust the world. People are not just a self in one moment, they are a continuity. You are like a wind of experience going through. I remember I created the term experience tunneling. I wrote it in this book called The Inventor's Sphere. And experience tunneling was so crucial because what it means is that you are going through each experience being defined by that. Literally, I feel this. Every word I say, it's like an inner realm sort of simulation. And then I'm walking through to the next, walking through to the next. And it's like, as a human being, we have focused too much on the human design in accordance to language and haven't really noticed that what is being here is just being. It's like, have you noticed nobody needs proof to know that they're being here? That's one thing at least the person can confidently be confident about. It's like, I know I'm here at least. I have no clue, why this world is here, why everybody else is here. Do you know why nothing, the idea of nothing is here, how the idea of the temporary or the eternal can even exist, but at least I know that I am here. You know what I mean? The world is just, it's like weather. In the outer realms, we have weather. In the inner realms, we have weather, but in accordance to the person's identity. If the person is tired, they are so agreeable. You'll be like, oh my God, why is this person so nice? Oh yeah, they're tired. And you see someone who's not tired, they care about the expressing an effort for the continuum, for something continuing. When I think about my own life, it's just an activity. Pretty much I'm watching one human being. Pretty much I'm like a GoPro camera for, yeah, just like a GoPro camera. When I think about the value of my individual material life, yeah, I'm this phenomena, this being, this creature, that I just like, like every other human being, we move and we work, and what happens? In the process of accumulating something, the person's immediate vision can be forgotten. What that means is, let's say you're a great violinist and you suddenly can't play the violin, and for some years you have to play, I don't know, like the drums. You're a great violinist, but for some years you have to play the drums, and you're like, okay, for a couple years I'll play the drums, then I'll finally get a chance to play the violin. And the person goes on playing the drums every day, trying to get through to get to their vision, not realizing that every moment of your life where you move, it's like a recorded, it literally, you're creating the memory of your future self by how you live. So if the person is a great violinist, but they're just playing the drums and they're not even good at the drums, but they're like, oh, I have to get through, then it's gonna be like, after some point the person's gonna play the drums so long, be like, okay, I was never a violinist. Oh my God, why have I been playing the drums for so long? Sometimes it is true that when a person goes in a certain mode for too long, they feel if they go out of that mode, they will be different. This is why you have to abandon language on a very extreme mystical level by recognizing that there is an experiential mover. Geometry is everything. Can you see the geometry of the snowflake and look at the ability of the human mind? We can look at the geometry of the snowflake, visualize it in a sort of XYZ dimension and perceive it in outer space as a space station. Imagine in the future our space stations, interstellar cities look like how the geometry of these snowflakes. Like the one on the right corner, the two on the right, you can totally see three-dimensional cubic structures. You know, like literally the background is the closest thing this you can get to. You know, we are living in such an information age. I feel nobody really wants answers. People want the right questions. When I look for answers, I am not looking for the new. I am looking for the satisfaction of the past. But when I wonder about the question, you know what that means? This is such a unique method. I just noticed I do this often. What does that mean? That means, let's say you see a problem. You see any sort of problem in your life, any problem. What can you do? You see the problem, then you think of an answer, correct? Let's say you see a problem, you consider an answer, but you also see the probability of your answer, and you see, let's say it doesn't work. So you looked at a problem, the answer you had, the knowledge you had couldn't answer the problem. What's the next thing you can do? Okay? The next thing you can do, or a strategy you can say, is that you can wonder if this problem that you were looking for, you gave an answer to, you can think of a more chaotic problem. I'll tell you this story. I'm now remembering about it. I had this math teacher in Iran named Mr. Tehrani. Literally, his last name was like the name of the town. And I remember he told me in Iran they have these very advanced, complicated physics exams. And he was studying physics, and he was like in this very elite school. And he realized he didn't have time, like he didn't spend enough time. Like he came to a situation where the most important exam, this is the math teacher's story I'm just sharing with you. He realized he didn't have time to study for the math exam. So what he did was he found the hardest question on the math exam that required the knowledge of all the other ones technically. And so he started solving this incredibly complex, math problem out of all the different problems his mind needed to get acquainted before he went to the battlefield of the exam. So that's what he told me. Let me see. Where was I in the story? Pretty much what he does is he focuses all his time on solving the most complex problem. He goes to do the exam. Once he's learned how to do the most complex problem, all the other ones became simple to him. So it was as if like he could answer a lot of the problems, but the major problem, imagine if it's a ship and this ship has holes in it, he solved the biggest hole of the ship. Now the other ones were a bit easier. No world stands alone. It needs the other worlds to recognize itself. You know, it's very interesting. I started in this life as a named animal, as a named object. Now I perceive myself as the nameless activity within a field. And certain parts of the field are in my control, and those ranges of that are in my control I can do something about. It's like the painter has as much reach as there is different kinds of paint, you know. That means if I was in a black and white world, I would endlessly see the endless relationship of the contrast between the black and white. You know, if I'm in a world where it's only one light beam, there's nothing I can do. It's like you see that the nature of the thing is, if you remember yourself in accordance to a subject, it's like before you were born, this is the question. What says that you require to, even let's say from a Buddhist even standpoint of reincarnation, what suggests that it should be a human idea in the boundary of creaturehood even? That means it's as if the person remembered their past life and they were like, oh my God. And their friend was like, what did you remember? Their shamanic friend, you know. Everybody has a shamanic friend, you know. It's like pretty much this world we have built, it's just everybody, I feel either you're going towards engineering or shamanism. We are a candle in the darkness of a vast cosmos. And matter is incredible, I would say. Even from an immaterial perspective, you can say without matter, there would be no dimension to the world. That means if we were not objects, if we were just sight, imagine we were like wind, just actual wind, but conscious. Imagine wind became conscious and we were like, no way. Every time a breeze comes, it's like that wind knows what's going on. The world is so vast. Yet we are distracted with how we should be as an individual. You know, when I think about my human rights, like universal human rights, I've realized that it's like what right does an ant have on the whole garden? The ant is a part of the garden. I would say man's only obligation is to notice nature, notice and wonder why it's here. You know, for me, it's here's the thing. This only happens when you get tired of answers. When you get tired of answers from your outer realms and your inner realms, then you really understand what I mean by this antenna idea. This is pretty much where I feel a lot of people who are in you can say the denomination of karma yoga, they will all come to this, to the ultimate work. That means it's like we're in a world that's working and there's this endless, cause and effect systems going on. When I look at how complicated and fascinating the life is underneath the skin of the human being, you know what it's like? It's as if like all these different systems working at once to be a completely different system. You know what it is? I kind of, I remember I saw this, like people are going to feel like I'm a time traveler, but I remember seeing this radio where you could wind it up, you know, and it would create this charge and it would, you could get access, like the radio would work, right? And I remember sometimes you had to keep it going endlessly, so it was like a workout. But I feel we are very similar to that wind up radio. It was also a flashlight too. It was like a very unique product. And this wind up radio is really like that, where we are winding up our realities. We are simulating them. We are spiraling them. So you can say for me, really, when I speak, it really feels like there is a sort of spiral. You can go forward in a straight way or you can spiral, and you cover more. Movement and noise are our intelligence today. Silence and stillness are our intelligence tomorrow and even before today. You see, if you don't fear silence and stillness, it's like that's pretty much like how this life ends. A system is pushed and then it stops. And all that remains were the seeds planted, again, like trees that the person will not be sleeping under their shade. I mean, it's really poetic. We're born to die. It's like life is pretty gangster. But I'll tell you, really, it's not worth it as well. As far as I consider reality, I could have access to all the libraries, all the information on the planet, all the teachings in the universal sector, but after the person has attained everything, it's like, what then? What if we became everything, we got bored? We became nothing, we got bored. Then we became something, we got bored. Then we became everything, we got bored. And really, the cycle is actually not just in the conscious waking of the human framework. I honestly feel we are geometrically being simulated as human existence to ourselves. I feel the eyes are in the driver's seat, but they are not the only one in the car. There's so many ways that intelligence moves that you can't write it down. That's why I created this idea where I personally feel this is the most important idea in human existence. Why? Because the language threshold is where language is limited, but you are experiencing something that either hasn't been given words to yet or it is unspeakable. It is beyond the threshold of how much language can be used to define the phenomenon. And that's where poetry happens. The closer you get to the language threshold, the universe becomes infinitely possible, then incredibly void, then the unknown infinity. Then the wonder of what is beyond the veil of emptiness. Because I wonder about it. I'm like, what does fear mean? The concept of fear. If we look at it, I'm going to check the. Let's look at this. Let's see how Saint Dictionary has defined fear. So fear is a noun. Who knew? All my fears this whole time have been nouns, guys. You know, anybody who is afraid, you're afraid of a noun. That fear. It's also a verb too, of course. So let's see. Noun, an unpleasant emotion caused by the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Fear for a feeling of anxiety concerning the outcome of something or the safety of someone. The likelihood of something unwelcoming happening. A mixed feeling of dread and reverence. The love and fear of God, as an example. Then we go to the verb. Be afraid of someone or something is likely to be dangerous, painful, or harmful. Fear for, feel anxiety on behalf of. Avoid doing something because one is afraid. Used to express regret or apology. Regard God with reverence and awe. Literally, I said Saint Dictionary. One of the definitions is so we have then, I guess this is worth reading too, for fear of, to avoid the risk of a particular thing happening, never fear, used to reassure someone, no fear, used as an emphatic expression of denial or refusal, put the fear of God in someone, or put the fear of God into someone, okay? Make someone very frightened, without fear or favor. And the word is literally comes from danger. Fairen. Or fair, I don't know. It's like an A and an E combined. I've never seen this letter before. Fear is a concept, and while there is endless concepts, and there's even the potential for there to be endless concepts, you would say an immortal being walking this earth would then create an alphabet that would be like endless. The immortal being would get bored, endlessly creating different languages, different, you know, additions to language even. It's that we are looking at things, and just like how words have multiple meanings, just like how a word can be used in different ways, we can take this different senses, the five senses, as letters and different kinds of words being generated. We can take each sense, each of our senses, the five senses, each of them we can treat. Imagine there was an alphabet to sight. Imagine there was an alphabet to sound. Imagine there was an alphabet for taste. Imagine there was an alphabet for movement. You know what it is? The dot needs the circumference before the radius can exist. And we can say the radius, what is bridging the known and the unknown, the body and the soul, is the conscious mind. Guys, I need a quick intermission. I'll be back. Okay, guys, I'm back to continue. We need to be a self to have a relationship with the world. If the self is seen as the world, there is no self, there's only the world. If the world is seen as the self, there is no world, there's only self. Back in the day, the mystics told us that wonder about the self and go to the true nature of experience. The mystics saw an unknown mind here first, then a known body. You can say the ancient world saw an unknown mind first, then a known body. The modern world sees a known body first, then an unknown mind. Because we base reality on the physical, technically it's like our identities are empty. Because a subject isn't an object. That means just a person uses a name, they could have had any name. Literally, it's just letters in the alphabet. We're all different letters of the alphabet as far as I'm concerned. It's like if somehow we wanted to know what 8 billion types of human beings on one rock in the middle of nowhere looks like, well, guess what? The ancient world saw it as a dream. The modern world sees it as an awakening. One side completely worshipped the unknown, the other side completely renounced the unknown. Yet, those who saw the unknown and realized that's the point, that's when you know the unknown, that you realize it is an unknown. It is a glitch in the system of all that the person's mind is trying to structure in a known way. You see, it's like when you think about what is really learning, what is understanding. This is something that I realized was the mistake of the educational system. The educational system does not explain sight. It just puts something in front of the sight of the person, you know? That means really there isn't true teachers in the educational system. And even if they were, the system's designed where they can't be true teachers. The reason is because a true teacher has to care for the ears of the student. And what's even stranger is that I kind of like, it was like mind blowing to me that imagine all the people who have completed assignments and homework and all this for educational systems and all those assignments being thrown away. You know why? Because we are just testing the past, testing to see if if the children of the future generations can see the past exactly. We should treat the mind of the human being as a space, and it's important what is put by the epigenetics outside of the person into that space and what the person puts in that space. I can tell you who I am. When I was younger, I thought it was just me. But as you get older in this life, you begin to see the interconnectivity of phenomena, and that calms you down, making life no longer a chasing game. It's like it wasn't about time. Somebody asked Plato, imagine, you know, somebody came up to Plato, it's like, Plato, what time is it, man? Do you have a sundial on you or something, can you tell me the time, bro? I'm late for work. And Plato realized he didn't have a sundial, like he couldn't tell the time, and he looks at him, he's like, buddy. And Plato realized he's a philosopher in that moment. He's like, yo, time is the moving image of eternity. That's what time. You know what imagination, conscious imagination, or speech, or when I say the inner realms is like a film, the internal cinematic language? You know what it feels like? It feels like, imagine if in the future, by the whim of your hand, there would be electronic simulations, light holograms. So imagine you were an engineer. You saw this, like, you could, anybody who's seen this scene in Iron Man, technically he does that. Technically, Tony Stark has that thing where he just moves his hand in mid-air and he's designing something through hologram light. Right now, I want you to imagine you have that, but not in a visible light. A light that hologram is accessible to your inner realms, to the eyes of your mind. And forget the stories. I am telling you, stories make a person heavy in the unknown. You go into the unknown having too much of an expectation. You have forgotten why it's called the unknown. This is why the exits and the entrances, you can say the entrance into the system, you don't necessarily have to be humble, but to exit the system, you have to be humble. And that humility means you learn how it's like you're dancing with the world where manifest reality moves, then it's the turn of the inner events. I can say that a person can physically move as an object, and a person can move as an attention to different angles of the environment. Attention is the god of thought. It is the center of the conceivable universe. It is the source. That means the person thought this world was a simulation, then realized they're the one simulating. It's like, oh my God. This whole life, and the person's suffering, the person's pain, the person's baggage or whatever happened to the person. It's as if, like, who is that suffering? And the person realizes the mind is jumping from branch to branch. That as your attention pilots to a new view, you view things anew. We fear a concept, but we observe the concept. And so this is the biggest question. Not what is death or what is after death, but who is dying? This question is so deep that it's like a temporary being that knows it's temporary, wondering if there is something that has never moved. As if truth never made a mistake. So if the person is to see the truth, how can you have it feel off from it, In the inner realms, there are seasons. The mind can move time. In the same way, a person can remember their past. And in remembering your past, I don't know if people realize this, any memory you remember, your body behaves in accordance to that memory. If you listen to a beautiful song and you close your eyes and you just listen to that song and that song takes you somewhere in your past, the behavior of your body based on the internal event changes you. Leo Tolstoy, this Russian philosopher, in this letter he wrote called Bethink Yourselves, there was a passage where he said the Russian Tsar had come to the people during the, what is it, Russo-Japanese wars. So in the Russian Tsar would say to the Russian people that God is with us, and the Japanese leader would also say something similar. And so it was two nations, citizens of different lands that had never met each other, colliding in a battlefield, being destroyed. Leo Tolstoy, this philosopher, was trying to point out the chaos, the blindness, how each side thinks they're justified. So I find when it comes to human interaction, something similar is going on. But it's going on in regards to what reality should be. And because we make laws and the laws are in accordance to policy, and policy is based on the human efforts to change it or to update it or whatever, okay, guys, I want to read some quotes about, go into a quote tunnel about interconnectedness. Chief Seattle. Humankind has not woven the web of life. We are but one thread within it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together. All things connect. Alex Gray, which I believe to be, he's a painter. This guy's an incredible painter. The infinite vibratory levels, the dimensions of interconnectedness are without end. There is nothing independent. All beings and things are residents in your awareness. John Muir. When one tugs at a single thing in nature, he finds it attached to the rest of the world. Martin Luther King Jr. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. The Dalai Lama. Being concerned about other people is especially relevant in today's world. If we consider the complex interconnectedness of our modern lives, how we depend on others and others depend on us, our outlook, how we depend on others and others depend on us, our outlook will change. We'll begin to see others not as somehow distant from us, but as people we're in touch with, people close to us. We will no longer feel indifferent to them. Martin Luther King Jr., whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. It's the whole quote now. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. I don't know how many people know this, but Martin Luther King has actually commented on the structure of reality. So you see, Martin Luther King Jr. says, whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. That means if one member of the human civilization is suffering, which technically means inefficiency, we can't say we're an advanced civilization. An advanced civilization, the bar is set so high that it's like there is no mistakes. Because the idea is, even if there are mistakes, they're instantly solved. They're instantly fractalized, scanned, and then resolved. Archbishop Desmond Tutu. One of the sayings in our country is Ubuntu, the essence of being human. Ubuntu speaks particularly about the fact that you can't exist as a human being in isolation. It speaks about our interconnectedness. You can't be human all by yourself. And when you have this quality, Ubuntu, you are known for your generosity. We think of ourselves far too frequently as just individuals, separated from one another, whereas you are connected. We think of ourselves far too frequently as just individuals separated from one another, whereas you're connected and what you do affects the whole world. When you do well, it spreads out. It is for the whole of humanity. Nadim Aslam. Pull a thread here and you'll find it's attached to the rest of the world. Chief Seattle again. All things are bound together. All things connect. This site, whoever made this web page, guys, I'm reading from, was such a diabolical genius. He's pretty much taken parts of sentences and, like, imagine a full quote and you take like only one sentence of that and make that a separate quote. Anyways, Tara Brach. The spiritual path is not a solo endeavor. In fact, the very notion of a self who's trying to free her dash himself is a delusion. We are in it together, and the company of spiritual friends helps us realize our interconnectedness. The Dalai Lama. Interdependence is a fundamental law of nature. Even tiny insects survive by mutual cooperation based on innate recognition of their interconnectedness. It is because our own human existence is so dependent on the help of others that our need for love lies at the very foundation of our existence. Therefore, we need a genuine sense of responsibility and a sincere concern for the welfare of others. David Niven. You're not just here to fill space or be a background character in someone else's movie. Consider this: nothing would be the same if you did not exist. Every place you have ever been and everyone you have ever spoken to would be different without you. We are all connected and we are all affected by the decisions and even the existence of those around us. This is very true. I don't know who David Niven is, but like, this quote is so true because you know what I was thinking, guys. What I was perceiving in my inner realms when I was reading this. I thought of all the places I have ever been, and for how many people I have been part of the background as a person walking. Just throughout my life, it's just very fascinating to feel how many people's memories I'm like this tiny piece in the background. You know, of all the places the person goes in their life. John Kabat-Zinn, I don't know who that is. Perhaps ultimately an actor. I don't know. Perhaps ultimately spiritual simply means experiencing wholeness and interconnectedness directly, as seeing that individuality and the totality are interwoven, that nothing is separate or extraneous. If you see in this way, then everything becomes spiritual in its deepest sense. Doing science is spiritual, so is washing the dishes. James, I don't know if I can pronounce this, Gleick. It is not the amount of knowledge that makes a brain. It is not even the distribution of knowledge. It is the interconnectedness. Carl Sagan. Cosmos is a Greek word for the order of the universe. It is, in a way, the opposite of chaos. It implies the deep interconnectedness of all things. It conveys awe for the intricate and subtle way in which the universe is put together. Joanna Macy. We are capable of suffering with our world, and that is the true meaning of compassion. It enables us to recognize our profound interconnectedness with all beings. Don't ever apologize for crying for the trees burning in the Amazon or over the waters polluted from mines in the Rockies. Don't apologize for the sorrow, grief, and rage you feel. It is a measure of your humanity and your maturity. It is a measure of your open heart. And as your heart breaks open, there will be room for the world to heal. That is what is happening as we see people honestly confronting the sorrows of our time. Rebecca Adamson says the indigenous understanding has its basis of spirituality in a recognition of the interconnectedness and interdependence of all living things, a holistic and balanced view of the world. All things are bound together, all things connect. What happens to the earth happens to the children of the earth. Humankind has not woven the web of life, we are but one thread. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. To continue with the quote tunnel, guys. Life is not what you alone make it. Life is the input of everyone who touched your life and every experience that entered it. We are all part of one another. Joanna Macy again. This is a dark time filled with suffering and uncertainty, like living cells in a larger body. It is natural that we feel the trauma of our world. So don't be afraid of the anguish you feel or the anger or fear, because these responses arise from the depth of your caring and the truth of your interconnectedness with all beings. John Kabat-Zinn says Buckminster Fuller himself was fond of stating that what seems to be happening at the moment is never the full story of what is really going on. He'd like to point out that for the honeybee, it is the honey that is important, but the bee is at the same time nature's vehicle for carrying out cross-pollination of the flowers. Interconnectedness is a fundamental principle of nature. Nothing is isolated. Each event connects with others. Bryant H. McGill says there is a deep interconnectedness of all life on Earth, from the tiniest organisms to the largest ecosystems, and absolutely between each person. Fritjof Capra. The more complex the network is, the more complex its pattern of interconnections, the more resilient it will be. Ian Somerhalder. If we recognize the interconnectedness of the changes our planet needs, we become true solutionaries, and our united power is unparalleled. Well said. I'm going to share this quote, guys. Guys, the quotes I share in the chat section, whoever's listening, you can share this in your social media. We can use social media for a consciously, Joseph Campbell says, what is the cause, though, of the growth of an acorn? The oak that is to come. What is to happen in the future is then the cause of what is occurring now. And at the same time, what occurred in the past is also the cause of what is happening now. In addition, a great number of things round about on every side are causing what is happening now. Everything all the time is causing everything else. No world stands alone. If there's this interconnectivity to all phenomena, eventually a collective activity is considered. We are like the human being is like we're like bees that need to get the honey, then build the beehive. We are talking geometry. The purpose of an object of a moving object was to notice that it's a subject. The purpose of a moving subject is to notice what could never move. In the Upanishads, it says the seer of the seen is unseen. That means the one aware that it's like how you are aware that you are aware of something is attributeless. You can't give it an attribute because what you're aware of is the attribute. Sorry guys, my attention's gone to something. I'm just trying to think how I can word it. Individualism can be a choice, but collectivity never can. That means we can never become collective. We can just realize we are. Or remember we are. That means, let us say, we're wondering about three types of purposes for life. The purpose of life for the model of a drop of water for the river and for the ocean. If you live as a drop, you live alone, you die alone. You live as a drop in a river, you live together, and you die together, pretty much. That means you live alone, but even when you transition out of this realm, it's as if you can't be alone. You know, the world is here. Excuse me. And when it comes to the ocean is the end of purpose because there never was a beginning to it. We're just energetic movement, we're conscious, we have an opportunity to express. We should treat the human biology as an advanced instrument, technology, or even as a brush. So pretty much you have this rare brush that evolves, that appears, it's like after 4 billion years, and what are you going to do with it? And most people, their inner realms, they treat it as a drop, so they don't share their inner realms. What that means is we're living in a society that is way more advanced behind our eyes than outside of our eyes, and so we are not actually updating the outside, we're just treating our own behavior of the outside differently. And the last idea, I said at the beginning of the first part of this talk, which is a different video. um, a coin with endless sides. That means we have access to one side of the coin, the visible object. If we are to have truly access to the other side of the coin, it is not the same face. It is not the same dimensional framework. Just like bees, their purpose is to get honey. The purpose of the human being is to get knowledge to build the hive. That means there is no value to knowledge kept to self. Pretty much we should treat it as if like an advanced civilization, like an advanced hive, and we as communicators, as conscious beings that can entertain a multidimensional framework, a void framework, a singular framework, a dualistic framework, an infinite framework. So I don't know. It's like when I think of myself as a drop in this world, I'm going to evaporate soon. When I think of my mind as a river, I feel my mind can't die. The river goes on. Even though a drop may come off the river and evaporate or something, but like I'm telling you, still though, the river continues. That's the cool thing about being caring for the collective, for the hive, for the advanced civilization, because you feel like some some aspect of your life went towards the greatest potential of the human being, of the species, really. We've managed to build cities, we can manage way more complexity than this. It's just it hasn't been allowed from the inner realms because of this normality for certain cultural programs to continue. So I feel like the whole linguistic simulation needs a conscious makeover. And the new generations should not just be concerned about, like, the way the new generations should learn about the past is by authentically exploring something about their current reality, which then when they need further information, they go to the past, you know. That means a lot of things that they teach, in the way they teach or the concepts they share in the educational system, it's literally like it's like the idea is past. It's like the child in the educational system is like, wait a minute, am I just learning what people used to know? Am I memorizing what people used to know? Is that what's going on? What about what we know now? Now, in the here and now, there is no teaching. There is just eyes dwelling in the mystery of the world they have found themselves manifest in. The question becomes incredibly philosophical. It's like a philosopher heard two scientists speak about how the universe came from nothing, and the philosopher started laughing. And people were like, "Why is the philosopher laughing?" And the philosopher's like, "It's just adorable, when you really want to entertain the imagination and the abstraction and the potential of whatever kind of mechanism we find and whatever story we give it. After some point in the regression of the origin, when you're trying to reverse engineer a system, you get to a point where nobody has defined it or it can't be defined. So what happens is anything. If I, like, for example, this cup of coffee here, I'll use it as an example, right? This cup of coffee, I can look at it, and from this one cup of coffee, I can access all of knowledge. And people are going to be like, how, Mr. Within? How can you look at a cup of coffee? Let me tell you how. I look at this cup of coffee. I see it's an object. The moment I see it's an object, all phenomenology that is objective relates to it. The moment I see it has a color, all phenomenology in color relates to it. Do you know? The moment I see it has a shape, for example, the circular shape and all a cylindrical shape, cone shapes. So you see what it is. It's literally like, it's when I see its design, it can relate to everything that has that shape. That means I can look at a coffee cup and technically see the wheels of a car instantly. The uneven wheels of a car. Do you see what I mean? Like, it's like, or you can even look at a coffee cup and see like a dumbbell, a barbell or something. So I'm just saying, it's like the mind can see, based on the design, open up and access that field. So when you realize there's an interconnectivity at work, that makes actually knowledge not about accumulation of category. The categories are changing. It's just that it's like the whole point of it is, now it's like the more we care about the past to be accurate, the future misses out. So we have to realize this cycle of life where, believe it or not, the ocean exists, the drops exist, the river exists, and even the clouds exist. Do you see? So it's this cycle of nature. And in this cycle of nature, you can say right now we're in the drop phase. Now this drop either finds a river or keeps falling back as a drop. I would say now we're experiencing ourselves as individuals. We can even say that's the drop model. We're going to say, like, okay, if there was some sort of evolution to the attention of the person, where would it go next? Most likely to a river. So if in this life you become conscious, this is why they would say once the person passes nirvikalpa samadhi, then the next life, the person they're born, they will automatically be enlightened because they noticed the stream, they noticed the river of vision, which I would say the Ganges should be the true metaphor of. Do you know, guys, in Vedic culture, there is something incredibly done. And of course, in different cultures, it's done as well, indigenous cultures, for example. But it's just seen that the Ganges was seen as a guru. Some people, you would ask them, who's your guru? And the person would say the Ganges River. Sri Ramana Maharshi, they asked them, who's your guru? And he's like a mountain. This mountain called Arunachal. In that moment, I was like, is this guy an extraterrestrial, and his ship is underneath the mountain? No, I'm joking. But it was just this, unique notion that after rivers, so you were you were void, you experienced the singular dimension, you experienced the dualistic dimension. The mind attempted the infinite, but then after the infinite, it returns to the void. So there has to be a shift. So when you come to emptiness, you got to change gears. When the attention completely comes to emptiness. If all of it is interconnected, believe it or not, regardless of what I say, like this could be this funny moment where in the future where I'm gonna look a bit foolish, but it's fine. And why is that in the future, if we truly realize there is this collective field and this collective mind, there is no reason to speak. That means everything anybody has ever said has been recorded in the collective mind, in the field. In the field of activity where 8 billion knowers have popped out, have spontaneously, like, it's like, oh my god, it's like instead of a wild Pokemon appearing, it's a wild human being, appearing. And I have to share this quote from Da Vinci. He says, uh, to develop a complete mind, it's ascribed to Da Vinci, but it's a useful quote. It says, to develop a complete mind, study the science of art, study the art of science, learn to see, realize how everything connects to everything else. So, notice the interdependency of the different fields of your practice in this life and the philosophy. Imagine it's 50 philosophy, 50 practical experience. That means you can get ideas for a little bit, but then you got to actually experientially truly navigate as a pilot here. And that experience, eventually dwelling through different archetypes, will have to settle into one moment. That means, imagine an airplane, the back of an airplane, like the movies opened, and the person had to hold on to something. The person hold on to one thing, right? They try to hold on to one thing properly rather than hold on to a bunch of things to solidify their grip, for example, in one dimension. That means, what is the logic of saying that the letter A is the letter A? It's like, where did the letter A come from? What's the logic and rationality and the reasoning for us to accept the letter A as a symbol? You know? You know, it's strange. We feel the person, like in the mainstream, we say we are thoughts, but we also say we have a thought, as if we're a thought having a thinking that it's a thought. It's like, makes no, after some point this notion just breaks away. It's just the misinterpretation of the Cartesian, I think therefore I am. To trust the world means to trust all existence experientially at once. You know, there is endless reasons to distrust. There's endless reasons to doubt. But there's also endless, like the moment there's those reasons, there's also the reasons of the reverse. That means we are seeking a freedom that requires us to perceive way more than the definition of freedom in the dictionary. We are beyond the words that were the greatest attempts of our ancestors, at least we hope to consider. So anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. Much blessings and namaste.